Well, good evening, everyone. How nice to have you here with these extraordinary spotlights. I can't see you very well, but I know you're there. And I want to say that right off the bat, congratulations to the talented team who put this together, because never has B1, not exactly a compelling name, this meeting room been so calm, collected, and beautiful, at least not since I've been here. So I think it's a good sign of things to come. For those of you just joining us, this conference, this call for action, is already off to a great start. Today, the lower gallery, right above us here, was full of 4 full roundtables discussing the future, our future, as we pass through the stages between independence and dependence, and of course bringing together all the considerations of space and place and program and service and community that weigh in as you take on this tremendous challenge of the new aging. What we like about that, and why we are so happy to host this, is it is a wonderful example, perhaps the best one that we've produced to date, to bring together all the considerations of integrative, collaborative, and architectural-led thinking to take on the really, really challenging problems of today. So as I said, it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight, particularly on behalf of Bill Bram, and Matthias Holwisch, who have personally invited all 30 of our speakers and collaborators, and who personally have invited many of you. So thank you all for being here. The speakers and collaborators come from an amazing array of places, from China, Germany, Slovenia, Spain, the Netherlands, the UK, and the US. Alphabetical order puts the United States last there. Did I forget? Are there people from other places that I didn't mention? Other countries? Other locations? Okay. The fabulous place of Berlin. And you include a biomedical gerontologist, a filmmaker, writers, a biotech engineer, mechanical engineer, industrial designer, architects, landscape architect, artist, registered nurse, and an ageless, apparently, mountain climber. And then there are another, as we move from tonight into tomorrow, another couple hundred or so people who are coming from UPenn, Penn Design, from Wharton, Penn Medicine, and Penn Nursing, from Philadelphia, from cities nearby. So we are just delighted to have you together here for this event. As always, we need to do some quick but heartfelt thank yous to the Jacob Rose Family Foundation, to the UPenn School of Medicine Institute of Aging, that's John Trojanowski and Kathy Jadrewski, to the Wharton School Healthcare Management Program, John Whitman, and to the UPenn School of Nursing, my formidable colleague as dean, the incredible Afaf Maliz. Thank you all very much for coming together to put together a strong component of Penn people to welcome all of our guests from around the world. So then, tonight's talk has a title that is as bold as the conference itself, Envisioning the Future. It's an activity that can only start tonight and must go on if we are to take on the broadened sense of responsibility and opportunity for architecture and design. It will take all of us and a plan for action if we're to succeed in altering the way we think about and take action on the new aging. With that, I'm going to bring to the stage Matthias Holwisch, and he will kick off the evening. Thank you all very much.
Are you ready to age? The question is, are you ready to new age? And if so, please help us to spread the word. Use Twitter, NACON, to communicate all the ideas you're going to see today and tomorrow at this conference. Blog about it, spread the word. My name is Matthias Holwisch, and I believe that aging is like flying into space. First of all, we have to train ourselves to be fit and healthy for our long journey to come. We have to build a rocket, and we have to build a launch pad to be able to shoot into space. And once we are there, we realize how hostile the environment is around us, how hard it is for our body to accustom to all the challenges which we are faced with, especially when we leave our little space station, our house. Thankfully, there are many, many innovations which have been produced to allow our life in space, and for us also when we are elderly. And these innovations also sometimes had an effect into the general life. We know all the example of Teflon. But the one thing which I believe is actually the most important aspect is a team to trust and to relate, so that we can travel to a destination with pleasure, with excitement, with an amazing journey. Because one thing we know is that there's no coming back. So it's most important that we create an amazing journey for all of us to that point in life. And this is why we're all here, to hear about new ideas, how that journey might be created. This is now my pleasure to introduce to you Aubrey de Grey. It was a dream for me to get Aubrey here to Penn. I had seen his TED Talk and I was massively inspired. And he actually going to question my whole space flight, because he's going to believe that we not even have to prepare for, with all this kind of technologies, for flying into space. But more when he's going to give this lecture, because Aubrey is Chief Science Officer of the SENSE Foundation. He's a biomedical gerontologist, and the SENSE Foundation is a non-profit organization which works to develop, promote, ensure widespread access to regenerative medicine solutions to the disabilities and disease of aging. In 2007, Aubrey published his book, Ending Aging. It is an honor for me to introduce to you now Aubrey de Grey.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Great. Let's see what happens. Oh, good, that worked. I think, yes. Okay, thank you very much, Matthias, and thank you to all the organisers for having me along. It's a delight to be at this meeting. I think that there is not nearly enough thought about the ways in which, it says here I've only got 3 minutes, I hope that's going to change, in which architecture can actually contribute to the welfare of the elderly. But, as Matthias very rightly said, my ambition is to remove that necessity, to ensure that from a physical perspective and also from a mental perspective, chronological age does not actually predict the progressive decline of function. And I'm going to tell you a little bit now about what I mean by that. Now, as Matthias said, we are interested in using regenerative medicine against aging. And regenerative medicine, of course, is a very fashionable topic these days. Everyone's heard of stem cell therapy. Everyone's heard of tissue engineering. In fact, a few years ago, tissue engineering was identified by Time magazine as one of the most, well, I think the 3 most important professions of the 21st century. And I think that may very well have been a correct prediction. So I can't make this work. Maybe I need to press. No, that's the one that should be working. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. So this is SENSE Foundation, the organisation that I'm the Chief Science Officer of. And as you've just heard, we're interested in using regenerative medicine against aging. What that means, from a practical, simple perspective, is simply that we want not to develop therapies that slow aging down, but rather therapies that actually reverse aging, actually genuinely rejuvenate people. Let me see what happens now. This is working now. And I want to point out that this is actually probably quite a good idea. What part of this does anyone in the audience not understand? It's pretty clear that aging is a bad thing from a health point of view. And the reason I've taken the trouble to say this is because a lot of people make a couple of really profound mistakes when they think about this question. First of all, they often just forget that aging is a bad thing. They have essentially coped with the horror of aging only by somehow psychologically hypnotizing themselves almost and putting the whole thing out of their minds, making their peace with this terrible thing, which is a fine idea in principle when the thing in question is completely inevitable, but might not be so fine anymore, and I'll come back to that. The other thing that people get wrong is they think that there's some fundamental distinction between aging on the one hand and age-related diseases like Alzheimer's or cancer or cardiovascular disease or whatever. And, you know, there's no argument that those diseases are a bad thing. We spend a great deal of money trying to figure out how to fix them, and that's money very well spent. But the point is that the only reason that those diseases are age-related at all is because they are aspects of the later stages of aging, aspects of the later stages of a process that goes on throughout life. There's also this minor detail, yes. It's not just that it's not fun, it's also not cheap. It's extraordinarily expensive getting frail when you get old. The amount of money spent on the medical care of the average individual in the Western world in the last year of their life is considerably more than the amount that is spent on them in the whole of the rest of their life put together. That's a well-known and very clear statistic. And, of course, that only talks about the direct costs. We're not even thinking about the costs in terms of loss of productivity of the loved ones of the elderly, or the fact that the elderly are no longer in the workforce providing wealth into society. So it's not much good, really. These are some numbers. About 150,000 people die every day worldwide, that of all causes added together. And that means that, you know, death is a big problem. But, in particular, two-thirds of those people, 100,000 a day, that's 30 World Trade Centers, right, every day die of aging. In other words, they die of causes that young adults pretty much don't die of. In the industrialized world, you know, it's not two-thirds, it's about 90% of all deaths. So we've got a lot of time before that death as well. It's not just the death, it's the disability. A lot of time before then, where people are disabled, and this is a number that's more or less taken out of the air, actually, because it depends on how you define disability. But still, you know, if we define it broadly in terms of declining vigor, then we're talking about a much bigger number. This is a number that people came up with for how much this actually costs just in the USA. You know, it's completely crazy. So I wanted to come back to this. Why is aging actually defended? Why do people say things like, oh dear, dictators would live forever, or, you know, how would we pay the pensions when you say that you might want to actually get rid of aging? I think the reason they do this, rather than actually remembering that we have quite a bad problem today that we'd like to solve, is simply because it's rational to try, by whatever means, to put these inevitable but ghastly things out of our minds. But, of course, that's only true if it really is inevitable. And my claim is that that may not be true for very long. So I'm going to talk about why now. I'm going to spend the rest of my time talking about the science of what we do. And that starts by a definition of the problem. This is a definition of aging that I find very useful because it helps us to think about, to organize our thoughts with regard to how we might combat it. What I'm saying here is, first of all, metabolism causes pathology. In other words, metabolism, the network of molecular and cellular and systemic processes that keep us alive from one day to the next and from one year to the next, eventually causes the ill health of old age, the mental and physical decline that I've been talking about. The second thing I'm pointing out with this definition is that the way that metabolism causes pathology is via a bunch of intermediates, a bunch of things that are side effects of metabolism that happen all the time throughout life, even starting before we're born, and side effects in particular that accumulate. So they get progressively more abundant in the body as time goes on. The composition of the body at the molecular and cellular level progressively changes, and that's what eventually gets in the way of metabolism and causes ill health. All right, so what are the options for intervention? Well, classically, you could say that there are two types of strategy. I'm going to call them the gerontology approach and the geriatrics approach. So the geriatrics approach is basically what we do today for the ill health of the elderly. What we do is we try and focus on the elderly themselves and try to address these pathologies and slow down the rate at which this accumulating damage of various sorts actually translates into pathology. And that's a fine idea in principle, but as we all know, we're not really very good at postponing the pathologies of old age. people live longer and they live healthier than they used to, but really not very much longer or not very much healthier. So it's better than nothing, but not much better. The other approach, the gerontology approach, says, well, okay, maybe prevention is better than cure. It often is in life. Maybe this is another example of that. So maybe we should get stuck in back here and actually clean up metabolism somehow, develop interventions that make metabolism create these various types of damage at a slower rate than normal. And that sounds like a great idea. We can't do it yet. That's what people who call themselves biogerontologists try to study. It's, again, a good idea in principle. So what do I think about these two approaches? Well, I've told you that the geriatric approach isn't very good yet. Might it be better in the future? I don't think so. Basically, the problem is that all these things that go wrong with us during life, during the later parts of life, interact, they accelerate each other, they exacerbate each other, and because they are being caused by something that's accumulating, namely this thing damage I'm talking about, these various molecular and cellular changes that happen throughout life, the problem is intrinsically getting harder with every year that the patient gets older. So what that means is you end up with an intrinsically harder and harder problem, and therefore, even in principle, the geriatrician's approach, the geriatrics approach, cannot be much better than nothing. It will always be only a small amount of benefit to the patient. Unfortunately, the gerontology approach isn't too good either. This is basically why. Metabolism is quite complicated. I mean, this is actually, of course, not the real problem. This here, as biologists in the audience will know, is a simplified diagram of a small subset of what we know about how metabolism actually works. But the real problem is that this is a simplified diagram of a small subset of what we know about how metabolism works, which is completely and absolutely dwarfed by the astronomical amount that we don't know about how metabolism works, even ignoring all the stuff that we don't even know that we don't know. So basically, it's hopeless. In principle, the gerontology approach could actually give substantial benefits in terms of postponing the ill health of old age. But in practice, for the foreseeable future, no way. It is an approach whose time has emphatically not come. So what else is there? Well, in order to explain the alternatives, I'm going to deviate a little bit and talk about cars. Here's a car that's more than 50 years old. Now, most cars, of course, don't last that long. They last maybe 15 years before you junk them and get a new one. The reason this one lasted a long time is because it was built that way. It was built with, corrosion-resistant metal and really tough tires and all those good things. And that means that it has lasted a lot longer. That's the same sort of reason why the human body lasts so much longer than the body of a dog or a mouse, right? But there's another way to make a car last unusually long. Here it is. Give it style. Make people fall in love with it. This car was built in the same year as the one on the previous slide, and the reason it's still doing fine is because it's been given a very good time. It's been treated really well, and it's been given very thorough, comprehensive maintenance throughout its life. Now that is very important. That shows that for simple man-made machines like cars, maintenance works. If you're thorough enough and comprehensive enough about periodic repair and maintenance of a machine, it's going to carry on working a lot longer than it was designed to. Now, the human body is a machine. It's a really complicated machine, but it's still a machine. So maybe the same sort of thing would apply. In other words, maybe we can do this, what I'm going to call the maintenance approach. Rather than trying to interfere with this process, which we don't understand well enough to be able to interfere in productively, and rather than trying to interfere in this process, which is too late in the day and is a fundamentally losing battle, we might be able to actually go in and attack the intermediates themselves, periodically repair the damage, not necessarily completely, but enough so that it doesn't reach the level of abundance that causes pathologies to emerge. And I claim that that approach might actually be much more feasible than either of the other two. It's preemptive enough to avoid this downward spiral of the geriatrics approach, but because we're not actually asking metabolism to create damage more slowly than normal, we're only fixing the damage after it's been created, we are also sidestepping all of our ignorance about how metabolism works, so we don't have the fundamental shortcoming of the gerontology approach either. That's one reason why the maintenance approach is so promising. There's another one, though, which is damage is actually a lot simpler than either its causes, metabolism, or its consequences, pathology. When I say it's simpler, you'll be pleased to hear that I'm actually going to tell you a little bit about what damage is from a concrete biological perspective. Here it is. I claim, this is my first outrageous claim of the evening, that all of the phenomena that qualify as damage by the definition I'm using. In other words, consequences, side effects of metabolism that accumulate in the body and eventually contribute to age-related ill health, all of them can be classified into one or another of these 7 big categories. And these categories, as you can see, are real bona fide, concrete, bricks and mortar biological phenomena. Junk inside cells means molecular byproducts of essential normal metabolic processes that, for whatever reason, the cell does not know how to break down or to excrete, so they accumulate, and eventually they get in the way. It turns out that that's really important for cardiovascular disease, and also for macular degeneration, and also for neurodegeneration. Junk outside cells is the same deal, but as I say, in the space between cells, and that also matters a great deal in neurodegeneration, in Alzheimer's disease, and in a number of other aspects of old age. Too few cells means simply cells dying and not being automatically replaced by the division and differentiation of other cells. And, of course, that's what stem cell therapy is there to fix. And I can carry on down this list if I had time, but I don't. So the question then is, how do I know that this is a complete list, an exhaustive list? One way is from a biological point of view. We just look at what the body's made of, cells and stuff between cells, what are cells made of, and so on. And we can basically get this list just by looking at what structures are long-lived and therefore can accumulate damage. But this rather circumstantial reason is another pretty good one, I think. We should really have discovered another type of damage by now, since the last one was discovered back in 1982, because we've come a long way in our ability to analyze biological systems, and it hasn't delivered anything. So there's pretty good reason for thinking this really is a complete list. But that's just the first piece of good news. The second piece of good news, which is the important one, is that we think we have a fair idea how to fix all of these things. And when I say a fair idea, what I mean is I think we can probably get to this point, which I'm calling robust human rejuvenation. That means adding 30 extra years of healthy life to people who are already in middle age before we start. In other words, they've already accumulated a fair amount of damage. So I don't have time to go through all these things. I already mentioned that stem cell therapy is essentially the way that we want to fix loss of cells. But as you can see, there are ways to fix all of these other things too. Now, most of these are pretty hard. I'm not saying they're not hard by any means. And my foundation works on very much the early stage proof of concept research that needs to be done to get this work going. Whoa, what happened there? Didn't do that. Thank you. If you really want to know a lot more about this, this is how. I wrote this book, as Matthias mentioned earlier, a couple of years ago. There's an entire chapter on each of the 7 different problems in aging and the prospective solutions. The key point here is that that's a lot of detail. And that's why it's possible for me to stand here and tell you that I think there's a 50% chance that we will get this all working in mice in less than 10 years and in humans in perhaps 20 or 25 years from now. I couldn't say that if we just had a broad perspective of how we might go about these things. We know so much detail about what we've already done and where we're going that I think we can genuinely put a time frame with a reasonable amount of confidence, I say, 50-50 chance, on this research. Unfortunately, it does need a lot of money, which is why we are a charity. We obviously encourage people to give us stuff and also to volunteer your time and your expertise. But yeah, start here if you want to know more. And I will stop there. Thank you very much. Do you want me to answer questions? Or?
Thank you, Aubrey. Fantastic. I'm glad that, I have just 50% of my life expectancy surpassed, so 25 more years. So I'm still in your age frame so that I can benefit from your research. Thank you. One of the amazing things about being at Penn and lecturing here is the amazing energy and research power from the students. And we started with looking into all kind of aspects of aging and who would be interesting to talk to. And suddenly one of my students popped up and was like, hey, have you seen that movie? The movie To Age or Not to Age? And I hadn't seen it, and obviously made my research, got the DVD, checked it out. And Robert Kane Pappas is the director and filmmaker of that movie, which is a documentary that tracks the pioneers in the field of anti-aging research at Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, including also Aubrey de Grey. His most significant, probably known work, which he wrote, directed, filmed, and edited, is the mass media critique, Orwell's Roles in His Grave, a documentary based on the motives that freedom of press is dangerous to the freedom of press. Please welcome Robert Kane Pappas.
Hi. I just want to say I came at this as a filmmaker. I had never studied aging before. So I had done a film on the media, and before that I did drama. So this is really, I just interviewed the scientists, and I've come to certain conclusions. I'm not a journalist, and let's watch them for a bit. It's what we know for sure that just ain't so. That's Mark Twain. Evolution and lifespan. I have interviewed some evolutionary biologists, and they had something interesting to say about this. Video?
The most surprising thing to me over the last 20 years in the field is how easy it's turned out to be to change lifespan.
I think a lot of people think that we're biologically programmed to die, but the truth is that we're actually programmed for survival. There is no mechanism inside us that turns on to kill us when a certain period of time has elapsed.
Evolution doesn't care about how long you live. Evolution cares about how many kids you leave. That's all.
That's very important, that evolution doesn't care about lifespan. It cares about how many kids we have. It hasn't made its mind up about lifespan. That's what these scientists are saying. So it means that evolution isn't like, lifespan isn't like the speed of light. And then, let's continue, see what they say. You get sick when you get old. Next video.
Longevity and disease prevention go hand in hand. They're intertwined.
Aging genes and disease genes appear to be the same thing.
I think this understanding that genes control aging and that there's this deep molecular link between aging and all the age-related diseases is as fundamental as it gets. I mean, I think this ranks with the discovery of DNA, actually.
What these guys found out is what is so simple once you realize it. You get sick when you get old. It's not one thing that's going wrong, it's a host of things. And what these guys have found is the genes that control aging, or more, what they really do is they control our repair mechanisms. Aubrey de Grey, who was just here and is impossible to follow, talks about fundamental breakthroughs. And he's thinking about when we'll be able to actually have regeneration and get younger. I have a different feel for what happened. I think the combination of evolution not caring, specifically about lifespan, and the fact that aging and disease are so molecularly close, coupled with the speed of advancement, means that I think the fundamental breakthrough has essentially happened. What these scientists that I've dealt with from Harvard and MIT all have had great success in extending health span by stimulating these genes that keep the animal healthier longer and have a modest increase in lifespan. I think together what's going on here is that they're making this progress incrementally. There will come a point where some of Aubrey's stuff, I think, will become relevant. But it's happening so quickly now that I think the fundamental breakthrough has actually happened. And it's an understanding of evolution coupled with the speed of advancement. I think, unlike Aubrey, I think that these scientists, according to Lenny Garante, who I'm quite close to by now, 4 years later, says they've gotten to the foothills and they can see the territory. And it's moving so quickly that he speaks in ways he never spoke 3.5 years ago. So I sense, and I spoke to Brian Kennedy, the new head of the Buck Institute yesterday, who discovered the mTOR gene. And the animals that were given that, the mice, they lived to 30, they lived about like a 65-year-old living an extra 10 years. And this was proven in the NIH. So it's the advancement of these things that's noteworthy. All great truths begin as blasphemy. And this is kind of self-evident. When something new comes along, there's entrenched interests. And Lenny Garante has something to say about this. Next video.
The only thing I'm really not worried, but you could raise the question if there were sort of a magic bullet, silver bullet, that would hit multiple diseases of aging all at once, that it would render obsolete some of the drugs that are out there now. And again, you're bucking against vested, entrenched
interests. This is a funny thing, because as I interviewed these doctors, they're all worried about, you know, how the FDA works, and the process is so circuitous. And at the same time, the amount of money, if you could keep everybody healthy, health span, to let's say their 90s now, you would completely, you know, rewrite how medicine is practiced and how money is allocated. And as he mentions here, in passing, is that silver bullet. A lot of drugs that are proffered now for individual diseases, this is more like one-stop shopping, because you're basically keeping the body healthy. What happens? The implications, the more I know about the subject, the less I know. I wouldn't foster a guess on what's going to happen with population, consciousness. There's been tests where some of these compounds really improve memory. Lenny Garante's MIT lab has had recent successes against Alzheimer's, stimulating these genes. It's really going crazy. What will happen when people live longer? It's going to happen. It's clear. It's the trajectory of the science. What about something like power? I don't know. Video.
Is that everyone could be a consumer of an anti-aging pill, you know, but that doesn't mean
that everyone will get to be a consumer of an anti-aging pill. It's a really funny thing, because the information's coming from different sources now. A lot of these doctors work in labs. These are the very top scientists that are underwritten by very, very wealthy people. One of them in the movie, Nir Barzilai, who did the Centenarian study, is funded by Ira Rennert, his foundation, the fellow with the 100,000 square foot house in Sagaponack. The point here is, I don't know what's going to go on here, but this is real, and it's taken seriously by a lot of people. On and off the record, the way, I'm not a journalist, but the way media, and the scientists, almost to a man and woman, complain about the media in kind of funny ways. They say, whenever someone asks me how long it will be before something is going to come, they always say 5 to 10 years. It's almost a running joke in the movie. 3 years later, they say, oh, is it still 5 to 10 years? That's an example of what they tell the media and how much they know. It's delayed by years because the woman in Lenny Garante's lab that just published the Alzheimer's situation in July started when I was just starting when I had started shooting there 3 years ago. The media is a long ways, you know, away from that in reporting. But then the media report things like individual discoveries, where it's really the trend. It's the the angle of science, how they're all, scientists always fight. But it's that trajectory of science that's so compelling here in what's going on. For instance, the scientists are like the policemen or the politicians, but all of a sudden, if a politician got up and said, oh, by the way, we all do it for money, you know, well, they don't do that. Or a policeman said, oh, by the way, we take bribes. But 4 years ago, as of Halloween, David Sinclair said and admitted that he was taking one of these compounds on Charlie Rose.
I'll be honest with you, I've been taking resveratrol for 3 years, ever since we discovered that it worked in yeast to extend their lifespan. And I caution that I don't advocate other people do this just because I do.
And this is a funny thing, because I didn't come out of this as someone that's in the nutrient business or anything else. But the compounds that are coming over the horizon are naturally occurring. And then Big Pharma, actually in the middle of the movie, bought some of these guys' companies that I had in the movie, Sertris, for $720 million after I had been filming for about a year. And there's big, big money here. But some of the compounds are naturally occurring. For instance, the compound rapamycin was found in the soil of Easter Island, a bacteria. And that was being already passed by the FDA for the use of against organ rejection. Turns out that it also extends the life of mice. And I spoke at length to Brian Kennedy yesterday from the Buck Institute. And it's really, so here you have natural compounds. And the question is, they'll be available when the FDA does its tests of compounds that can be patented. And I don't know, that's 5 or 10 years or whatever. But some of them are around. And it's a discussion that is real. And this is, and there are more coming. And the good news is, as Brian said yesterday, so many new things are on the horizon here that if one works a little bit better, is a little more targeted and all this, these scientists are very certain that they're going to be able to extend healthy lifespan imminently. Now, as to Aubrey's stuff, he may be right. I don't know. But it's that trajectory and the speed of science that's really, really important here. And the big question, if you see the last thing here, there's a clam in my movie. And Dr. Ostad told me the story that they had discovered a clam off Iceland and killed it in 2007. It's 405 years old when they killed it. It was born the year that Shakespeare first staged Hamlet. And I think it's fitting here, because I think with the trajectory of the science, the question really is to be or not to be here. I don't know where it's going, but it actually gets right down to existential questions because of how this paradigm is shifting. And as a film director, I just laid it out. I have no axe to grind. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So some of you might want to think, is that all relevant for us? Is it all true? The answer is, we can all decide one way or another. If it's true, then we as architects have to find billions more of houses we can build for all the people who are going to live forever. If it's not true, then we have to continue what we have just started of really re-engineering and rethinking all of the architectural and urban infrastructures for an aging population as it is today. You may also see a little bit like a pattern in our didactic structure of this conference. We have not started this architecture per se, but an awareness of aging and changes in the environment we're in. And we're also going to come up with some critical voices. And one of them I would like to introduce to you now is Aline Weintraub, who's a writer and currently a freelance health science reporter. Aline was a former senior health writer at Business Week and has over 15 years of experience writing about healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and biotechnology. Her book about the anti-aging industry, Selling the Fountain of Youth, was published in September 2010. The book exposes how the anti-aging industry made a disease out of getting old and made billions by it, and portrays the hormone replacement sector as a pool of unproven claims, unacknowledged side effects, and marketing scams. Praised from Fast Company, wrinkles, fat, and low libido start to sound pretty good after reading this unnerving expose of America's $88 billion anti-aging industry. Please welcome Aline Weintraub.
Hello. So for most people, the term anti-aging conjures up images of face creams and Botox. But in the 1990s, a new industry was invented by doctors who had a simple and tantalizing idea. Hormones decline as we age, they said. So if we just replace them back to the levels they were when we were 30 or 35, we'll feel as good as we did back then. In essence, we'll stay forever young. I discovered this new anti-aging industry while working as a science reporter for Business Week in the mid-2000s. I kept hearing about these doctors who were prescribing human growth hormone to older men and women. And I thought, well, why would a fully grown, healthy person who's not an athlete want growth hormone? That single question opened up a whole new world to me. I discovered doctors all over the country hanging out shingles for rejuvenation centers or age management clinics. They prescribed all sorts of injections, pills, potions, tonics that have never been proven to halt the aging process and furthermore could be dangerous. So what are these doctors prescribing? Well, there's growth hormone. They say it builds muscle mass, it preserves the bones, it stimulates the immune system. Then there's testosterone, which many anti-aging doctors refer to as nature's Viagra. These doctors also prescribe so-called bioidentical estrogen and progesterone, which they say is a completely natural way for women to avoid hot flashes and other symptoms of menopause. Anti-aging doctors also put patients on expensive regimens of diet and exercise and supplements. In my research, I saw some incredible things hawked as anti-aging elixirs, including marijuana extract, and if you can believe this, ground up cow hearts. Throw in the oil of Olay and the Botox, and you have an $88 billion a year industry. So let's step back and take a look at how the modern anti-aging industry got off the ground. It all started with a single study of human growth hormone published in 1990 by a scientist named Daniel Rudman. He gave growth hormone to 12 men and found that over 6 months, those men increased their lean body mass, including muscle, by 9%, and they lost 14% of their fat. Well, this was a sensation. Rudman's study was quoted on more than 50,000 websites, and it became the inspiration for the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. This despite the fact that human growth hormone is illegal to prescribe for anti-aging. Furthermore, it's been shown to cause side effects such as high blood sugar, and many doctors believe it causes cancer to grow. Nevertheless, the doctors who started this movement were fascinated with the idea that growth hormone and other hormones and supplements might be the new fountain of youth. So, who's driving the growth of the anti-aging industry? Well, first, you have the doctors. So I found that most of the doctors who are drawn to anti-aging medicine are not hormone specialists, but rather people from other specialties like primary care and emergency care. They like anti-aging medicine because patients pay for it entirely out of pocket. You can't bill insurance companies and Medicare for this stuff because aging is not a disease. Therefore, it's not reimbursable as a disease. For doctors who are desperate to escape the hassles of managed care, it's very attractive. A, they can spend as much time as they want with each patient, and B, they can charge them whatever they want. Similarly, anti-aging has attracted a subset of pharmacists known as compounding pharmacists. These pharmacists make up their own special blends of hormones and supplements and sell them directly to patients, also for cash. And finally, there are the patients themselves. The vast majority of patients I met while reporting this book were baby boomers. And what they told me over and over again was they didn't want to grow frail like their parents did. They were willing to take whatever injection or pill would allow them to keep surfing and hiking and biking and playing with their grandchildren well into their old age. Boomer women who are facing menopause have been especially vital to the growth of the anti-aging industry. That's because a few years ago, a popular menopause remedy, Prempro, was shown to increase the risk of breast cancer, heart disease, and stroke. So the anti-aging industry latched onto that news and told women, we have something better for you. We can give you bioidentical hormones that are exactly the same as what your body made when you were younger, and they're safe and natural because they come from soy and yams, unlike Prempro, which comes from the urine of pregnant horses. Women started showing up in anti-aging clinics in droves. So who do you think has had the single biggest influence on the popularity of anti-aging medicine. It's not a doctor, it's not a pharmacist or scientist, it's this woman. Suzanne Summers, star of the 1970s hit sitcom Three's Company. In 2004, she declared her devotion to bioidentical hormone replacement in a book called The Sexy Years. In it, she wrote about her struggles against the 7 dwarves of menopause, whom she named itchy, bitchy, sweaty, sleepy, bloated, forgetful, and all dried up. The cure, she said, was bioidentical hormones, or as she put it, the elixir, the juice of youth that has sent the 7 dwarves of menopause off to the coal mines never to return. The Sexy Years was so successful that Summers wrote 2 follow-ups, Ageless and Breakthrough. In all 3, she portrayed bioidentical hormones as natural and safe for women to take for a lifetime. In 2009, the industry got its biggest boost ever when Suzanne Summers appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show. So let's watch some of that.
When I wake up, I start with estrogen every day of the month. They come in syringes. This is not a needle or anything. It comes in a syringe. So every day I put on a little of my estrogen and I just take the top off and just, put a little bit. It's amazing how little you need to get the effect. Rub it in. 2 weeks of every month, I take progesterone. This is my estrogen arm. The reason you put it on the skin is that with every pulse of your blood throughout the day, these hormones are coursing through your body. The other thing that I inject every day is estriol, 2 milligrams of this every day, vaginally, and I'm not showing you how I do that.
Suzanne has been taking these bioidentical hormones for over 10 years, but she doesn't stop there. She also takes about 60 dietary supplements a day.
3, 4. Oh my God, it's like a necklace. I've never thought of it like this. I take about 40 supplements in the morning, and then before I go to bed, I try to remember like around 7 o'clock to start taking the last 20. Alan makes a smoothie every morning, and I take that first 15 with the smoothie. Yummy. You make the best smoothies.
Scares me every time I see it. So, throughout her books and Oprah appearance, Summers urged women to have their hormones tested by anti-aging doctors and then to go out and buy custom-made mixtures of estrogen and progesterone from compounding pharmacies. These pharmacists are not regulated by the FDA, so they can pretty much say whatever they want about their products. The packaging on the typical bioidentical hormone is comforting and includes words like natural, real, green. Suzanne Summers in the anti-aging industry said only specially trained pharmacists could make hormones from yams and soybeans. Not true. The fact is plenty of pharmaceutical companies are making the same types of menopause remedies. They just aren't calling them bioidentical. These hormones are regulated by the FDA, and as a result, they have to include some pretty scary labeling. So I don't expect you to read this. This is the label of one of the soy-based estrogen products that is approved by the FDA. It has scary words on it like endometrial cancer and cardiovascular disease. Why? Because studies have shown that all estrogen and progesterone, regardless of the source, is risky. This seemed to surprise many patients I interviewed. I spoke to one woman, for example, who had switched from Prempro to compounded bioidentical hormones after reading Suzanne Summers' books. Neither her compounding pharmacist nor her anti-aging doctor told her about any of these risks. She had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. This is what she told me the night before she started her chemotherapy. I really thought hormones were perfectly safe, like when you give insulin to a person with diabetes. My surgeon said my cancer was invasive and likely caused by hormone replacement. I wish I had never taken it. Perhaps this woman says it best. She's a gynecologist who spends a lot of time trying to clear up the confusion created by Suzanne Summers. So there are other dangers as well. One of them is that compounding pharmacists who make bioidentical hormones are not as tightly regulated as mainstream pharmaceutical companies are. This photo was taken by a pharmacy inspector for the Florida Department of Health who documented careless manufacturing practices at compounding pharmacies. I call this the pharmacy version of a teenager's bedroom. You see exposed syringes and vials right next to what appears to be someone's breakfast. This is not how you're supposed to make drugs in this country. These people are packing up drugs with ungloved hands. The inspector presented these discoveries to an FDA panel in 2000. When he was asked to estimate how many compounding pharmacies in Florida were following good manufacturing practices, he said, most of the smaller pharmacies are not following any type of controls at all. 10 years later, we still don't have comprehensive federal laws preventing this sort of practice, and compounding pharmacies are booming. But it isn't just mom and pop pharmacists driving demand for anti-aging drugs. The pharmaceutical industry has joined in too. Perhaps you've seen the television ads recently asking, is it low T? Those are ads for Androgel, a topical testosterone gel sold by Abbott Labs. The aggressive ad campaign for this product has driven the market for testosterone from $34 million a year to $750 million a year in only a decade. Of course, low T is just a catchy name for male menopause, one of the most popular concepts in anti-aging medicine. The idea is much the same as it is with bioidentical hormones. Let's measure your testosterone, get it back up to the level it was when you were 30, and you'll be 30 again. Problem is, there are side effects. And in 2009, the FDA warned the public that it had received reports of testosterone gel rubbing off on children and causing symptoms of early puberty like increased libido and aggression. But the FDA is no match for people like this guy. He appears all over the country in newspaper ads for Cenogenics, a chain of anti-aging clinics. I met him, and indeed, he's a real doctor, and he does look like this. He's injected growth hormone and testosterone for many years. Who wouldn't want to have this kind of result? Much to my surprise, all of the anti-aging doctors I met were on some sort of hormone replacement program themselves. They had completely bought into the anti-aging credo, and you can imagine how appealing that is to patients. After all, if your own doctor is doing it, it must be safe, right? Let's take a look at the growth of the anti-aging movement. 10 years ago, the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine had 7,000 members. Today, 20,000. Cenogenics and the other chain, BodyLogic MD, have experienced huge demand from and growth from doctors and patients. I was in a BodyLogic clinic reporting this book the week that Suzanne Summers appeared on Oprah, and I can tell you the phones were ringing off the hook. Once these doctors have a captive audience, they sell them lots of other anti-aging potions. Some offer them tailored vitamin mixtures or special blends of vegetables and fruit juices. They sell all sorts of mysterious supplements they claim stimulate the production of stem cells and prompt tissue regeneration. The utility of any of this for life extension has never been proven. Still, what amazes me is how willing people are to try anything that might extend their lives. Two of the most popular anti-aging elixirs right now are resveratrol from red wine and the Brazilian berry called acai. Why are they so popular? There's our friend Oprah Winfrey again, this time with her resident on-air doctor Mehmet Oz. Winfrey and Oz have an anti-aging series, and earlier this year they featured both acai and resveratrol as part of that series. And here's this fellow again who we just met. He's David Sinclair, the Harvard scientist who discovered that resveratrol has amazing anti-aging powers in mice. He describes his findings on 60 Minutes and here with Barbara Walters on a TV special. The truth is that the company that Sinclair co-founded was designing much more potent compounds than resveratrol, and it wasn't studying them in aging, but in diseases common in aging people such as diabetes and cancer. Nevertheless, a whole new crop of anti-aging entrepreneurs capitalized on the hype. Hundreds of internet retailers popped up offering free 2-week trials of supplements or juices. All a consumer had to do was punch in their credit card and the products would come straight to them. Thousands of people were scammed. Buried in the fine print was the revelation that these products weren't free at all. In fact, they were signing up to get monthly shipments of the supplements or the juices for upwards of $90 a month. It makes me wonder, are we really so desperate to stay young that we keep falling for this stuff? So I just spent quite a bit of time telling you what doesn't work when it comes to staying young. The question is, what does work? Hard as it is to hear, exercise is the only thing that's been scientifically proven to fend off the aging process, and I find the research incredibly compelling. For example, one study found that men who became fit decreased their risk of dying of any disease by 44%. A half hour of moderate exercise a few times a week, such as walking your dog, which is what I do, is enough. Yet we just can't bring ourselves to exercise, as this Roper poll demonstrated. So let's think about some of the people that we've been talking about. That Cenogenics doctor, does he look and feel so great because of testosterone and growth hormone, or could the fact that he works out every day have something to do with it? How about Suzanne Summers? To her credit, she lives an active lifestyle. This is, after all, someone who started promoting the Thigh Master long before she started promoting hormone replacement. I met dozens of women who told me Suzanne Summers got me started on hormone replacement. Not a single one of these women said Suzanne Summers inspired me to start exercising. I think that's sad. In my opinion, aging people should stop searching for a magic pill or injection and do the simple things that they can do today to make the aging process easier. So I leave you with two questions. I think you know my answers. Is aging a disease? Should anyone be anti-aging? Thank you.
At this point, we should have had Joseph Colleen from the director of and founder of the MIT Age Lab. Unfortunately, his daughter has a stomach bug, and he apologizes that he could not show up today. We're still trying to get him for tomorrow, so we're going to keep you updated. Now we're going to have Jose Colucci from IDEO. I'm messing it up, I'm very sorry. Switching gears between the speakers. The exciting thing is about IDEO that it is an innovation and design firm that uses a human-centered, design-based approach to help organizations in the business, government, education, and social sector to innovate and to grow. Jose has training and experience in both mechanical engineering and industrial design, and he also has a PhD in biomedical engineering. His interested in social trends and design for the aging population is purely altruistic. During a recent class reunion, he realized that all of his high school friends are getting old. He wants to help. Please welcome Joseph.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the organizers for having me here. Thank all of you for being here. My talk is called The Designer's View of Aging. It is not called an aging designer's view, although that would be true as well, but it is also true of you. We are all aging. Now, we are living interesting times for, let me switch here. Okay. For the first time in human history, life expectancy is growing not due to reduction in infant mortality, but by the fact that people are living longer lives. We never had so many elders living among us like we do now. So in a way, Woody Allen got his wishes granted. So this is not, those two curves are not life expectancy at birth, but they are life expectancy at the age of 80, which means if you make it to 80, how much longer can you expect to live? And if you were born in 1900s, and by the way, only few people made it to 80 at that time, you could expect to live, 6, 7 more years, maybe less. Today, if you get there, and many people are, you can expect to live to be 90. Now, this is about to change because, let me talk about this current hypothesis first. Fries hypothesized in 1980 that human lifespan is pretty much fixed at around 85 years, plus or minus 7 years, and is not going to dramatically change in the foreseeable future. And that's what the U.S. Census and Social Security uses to calculate for their extrapolations and their stochastic models. Well, that's so 1980 because things are about to change. So if you read Aubrey de Grey's book, you're going to know about longevity escape velocity. And I'm not going to try to describe it in detail. I'll leave it up to you. But at some point, well, Aubrey hypothesizes that we will be able to live indefinitely long lives. By the way, the dates are my guess. He doesn't mention any timetable for this. Kurzweil has a similar hypothesis. The only real difference is that Kurzweil emphasizes more nanotechnology and bionic parts and eventually artificial intelligence. But even if you are very conservative and you don't quite believe those two hypotheses, you have to agree that we'll be able in the near future to borrow genes, to copy genes from people who are genetically gifted and apply them to ourselves. So the longest living people on the planet live to be 120 or 120 something years. Now, if we borrow their genes, we'll be able to live that long. And at some point, it's also plausible to assume that we'll develop super intelligent machines and we'll be able to replace ourselves. So for the sake of this exercise, I call those 3 periods. Number 1 is the phenotypical intervention. That's what we can do now to ourselves, to our bodies, to our behavior, and to even our extended phenotype. We are on the verge of being able to do profound genetic interventions. And later we'll be able to abandon our carbon-based life forms. So, stage 1, what is the implication? People are living longer lives now due to advances in hygiene and medicine. So if you look at the population distribution today, in 2010, you're going to see that 13% of the 13% of the top are people over 64. Now, in 2020, you're going to have 16% of the population above the age 64, while the middle is shrinking a little bit. In 2030, you're going to have 20%. It's a dramatic increase from today, while the middle people from 20 to 64 is shrinking even more, while the bottom remains pretty much steady. So the implication of that is that historically, money has always flown from the top to the bottom. So it used to be that you work, you accumulate some wealth, you retire, you die, you leave your wealth to your children, and they leave it to the children, their own children. Today, we don't know exactly what is happening, but we can be sure that tomorrow, if nothing changes, money is going to flow from the middle to the top and the bottom. And that's a very unfair situation if you are in the middle. So who are the culprits of that? Let's take a look at them. Well, let's think in terms of generations. We have in the U.S. and most of the first world, the so-called greatest generation. I think Tom Brokaw coined that term. They have been actually fantastic. My father is a member of this generation. He fought the Second World War, and they pretty much saved the world. Their kids are the baby boomers from 46 to 64. And then you have Generation Jones, Generation X, and Y. You could subdivide it into MTV generation, etc. But the fact is that those labels did not stick, maybe because they have a little bit less reality behind them than the boomers. Now, why are the boomers so important? Well, look at their numbers. At a time when the U.S. population was 171 million people, the boomers were being born in large numbers, like 4.3 million babies in a given year. Later, in the 90s, you had the echo boom. But, population in the U.S. was much larger. So the echo boom impact on society is much smaller. Now, the boomers changed everything. When they were born, we had to make more babies' clothes. We had to make more toys. When they went to school, we had to make more schools. We had to hire more teachers. We had to print more books. When they got their driver's licenses, we had to make more cars. We had to build highways. We had to create more infrastructure. So they have been driving economic growth in this country for about 60 years. Now, next year, 2011, the first wave of boomers retire. We will approach retirement age. So what is going to happen? gonna move to Florida and stay by the swimming pool with drinks with little umbrellas on top? But no, I don't think so. Those are the guys who invented sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So they will probably invent a different model. So as a design challenge among many challenges we could explore here, I have this one. How can we prevent money from flowing from the middle to the top and the bottom? And I have a clue here. I saw this woman, Rosa Finnegan, in 2008 when I took this picture. She was working at the time, at the age 96, and she was working at this company called Vita Needle, not because she needs to work, but because she wanted to work. And Vita Needle is a small manufacturer of specialty needles in Needham, Massachusetts. And from a technology point of view, they are kind of primitive. But from a social point of view, my opinion, they are extremely advanced. They employ mainly senior people. And most of their workforce is older than 65. They don't provide healthcare insurance because most of their people are in Medicare. They have flex time. They allow people to take 3-month-long vacations to go to Florida in the winter or to see their children. They can come anytime they wish, and most of them choose to be there very early because they like to do it. And they pay below market salaries because of those advantages. So they have an hour bank and they have to hire more people than they need, and somehow it works out for them. Actually, the owner told me, we don't select people for fitness. As long as they can negotiate 2 flights of stairs to our 2nd floor, they qualify. And since I started doing this 20 years ago, he told me, my profits increase. Those people are more reliable. They're better workers. So this is a fantastic model. And we could look at a lot of situations. In this, I would agree with what you're probably thinking. This is an extreme case. But when you look at the extremes, you can have good ideas that apply to the middle of the population. Now, instead of doing those things and worrying about those important issues, what do we do as a society regarding aging? We deny it exists. You look at the literature, and I think Arlene explored that very well. And by the way, Suzanne Summers is there. So I won't belabor this point. But we treat aging as avoidable. It isn't yet. So by postponing making the changes we need to make as a society, we're depriving ourselves, we're depriving future generations of the benefit of restructuring society for our longer lifespans. Now, are there things you can do to delay aging today? Well, it turns out the answer is yes. There are things you can do today. Are you ready? Eat less and exercise more. Actually, those are the only things we know with a 5 sigma level of evidence, like hard science. You'll be hard-pressed to find any scientific peer-reviewed article saying that Americans should eat more and exercise less. I didn't find any. Now, at a much lower level of evidence, you have all the rest. And I'm not saying they don't work. No, keep taking your fish oil, eat nuts, have friends. But the level of evidence for those is much, much lower than for the top 2. Now, this is about to change. No, we are entering stage 2, genetic interventions. Demographic forecasts, the one I showed you, the population distribution, don't take that into account because the extrapolations that you do in Social Security are very conservative. Now, if this happens, and will likely happen in the next decades, it's going to throw off our curves completely. So we'll be able to dramatically increase human lifespan using technology. Now, I will give you 2 examples. This is an example of lab-grown organs. Everybody has seen that little mouse with a neuron on its back. This is a mouse heart grown artificially. But maybe you don't know that we are growing bladders in the lab using people's own stem cells and getting them transplanted to individuals. Actually, in Massachusetts last year, 8 people got them. That picture on the bottom is a human trachea. It was transplanted to a woman in Spain, and it was grown from her own stem cells. But you know what? This sounds advanced, but it is so 2008. Soon, we'll be able to do much more. We'll be able to use genetics to manipulate our genes and do interventions at the somatic level of our organs, in the germline level. So we'll be able to pass on to our offspring those changes, artificial changes. This is, I believe Gregory Stock is going to talk more about this. He's a speaker for today. So I won't show much, but this picture is kind of very evocative of what is going to happen. This is the fountain of youth from the legend of Ponce de Leon. Now, initially, it's fair to assume that those technologies will be very expensive, and only, really famous, rich, and deserving people will get them. But we laugh. Well, I don't know about you, but when I look at this slide, I think I don't want to live forever. But no, as technologies do, this one will become, those technologies, those therapies will become more affordable as well. And other people will be able to afford them. And who are these people? Well, Americans over 55 own most of the financial assets in this country and in most of the developed world. And what happens when you combine wealth and longevity? Thanks to the pound of compound interests and accumulation of wisdom and the mere accumulation of money, you have geyser power. Right? So a disproportional amount of power in the hands of the oldest segment of the population, to the detriment of many of you in the audience. Now, if you think you have issues today with Social Security, Alzheimer's, cosmetic surgery, anti-aging therapies, you just wait to see what is coming. Now, we're going to have conflicts among generations. We're going to have really serious interventions in the human body. For instance, the organ farm that I showed you is meant to replace organs that evolution has given us. But maybe we can enhance them. That trachea was built on a collagen scaffold. Maybe we can make a better trachea, a better leg for an athlete. And with genetic intervention, we'll be able to choose a lot of desirable characteristics in ourselves and our children. And a new social, completely revolution in society is going to happen. So there are a lot of dire consequences if we don't pay attention now to those issues and don't start thinking and designing for this future society, because this is going to happen. Maybe there's no timetable that we can all agree on, but I think it's fair to assume that if science keeps progressing the way it has, and we shouldn't take that for granted. The enemies of the civilization are lurking behind us, but let's assume that it will. And then we have to address those issues through design, to behavior change, to nudging people towards a different society, a different model, to avoid serious consequences. So here lies Aubrey de Grey, killed at the young age of 184 years by members of the pro-death movement. Sorry, Aubrey, we don't want that to happen. Well, eventually, I don't know when, we're going to enter a different stage, our post-human future. We will be able to replace ourselves with intelligent machines. And I took this picture from Spielberg's and Stanley Kubrick's AI, and I consider those images from the last part of the movie more like placeholders for what is going to come. Nobody knows what those things are going to look like, if they will be probably not anthropomorphic like those ones. But one thing you can be sure, when that happens, designers will be no more. You shouldn't lose any sleep over this for now. Now, what I try to do here is not to show you some cool stuff my company Ideal has done. We certainly did a lot of stuff around aging and treatments for a lot of conditions that are age-related. But I wanted to show this more as a call to arms to designers, architects, and people who are thinking about how to shape society, because the best way to have a great future is to invent it. Thank you very much.
Proceed. Thank you very much. Excellent. Mm-hmm. Cool. Excellent. Yes, we're going to have already exchange between our experts here. This is also why we're all here together today. As the next speaker, I would like to introduce Dr. Greg Stock. And I'm extremely excited because he was the first speaker to sign up. And the person who recommended him for us to speak here promised us, as soon as you have Greg, you have everyone. And that is so true. I'm excited. Greg is CEO of Signum Bioscience. And Signum Bioscience is a private biotech company dedicated to developing small molecule therapeutical device from a signal transduction moleculation, and now I'm getting lost. Please start yourself.
Exactly.
Please welcome Greg Stock.
Thank you. Excellent. Here we go. It's good to be here. Thanks a lot. A little jet lagged. I just flew in from Turkey a few hours ago. We've been talking a lot about lifespan and such, but the latter stages of life's trajectory are generally, they can be pretty darn brutal. What we love is taken from us, our senses diminish, we lose our friends, our family. Let me see if we can get that going. We lose our friends, our family, our loved ones. We get decrepit generally, we die. It's really pretty simple at this stage of the game. Captured very easily there, and so from hour to hour we ripe, and then from hour to hour we rot, and thereby hangs a tale. And that's kind of the way things are. And so we learn to deal with aging and death. Now, one thing that we like to do, and it's pretty easy when you're young, is that we just ignore it. You don't see what's happening. But even if you take care of yourself really well, like these two guys, there comes a point when it's really still difficult to ignore that. So that's one thing we do. Or we deny it. We say the soul is eternal. It's going to live on. Or our creations live after us. Our family lives on. But it all sort of passes away. I think we know that. Or we can fight it, like Aubrey de Grey is doing. And I wish him well. I've tried to help him as much as I can. But somehow I kind of doubt that it's really going to happen in time for me. Okay? And most of us eventually come to accept it because we're forced to, because the alternatives are even less appealing. And the challenge of designing architecture for the later part of the trajectory of life is that it's for people of the future. It's for the world of tomorrow. And that could be quite different from what it is today. And so before we look at the needs of what these people are really going to be like, what they're going to need, there are lots of uncertainties about what that's going to be looking like. I want to sort of talk a little bit about why that's so hard, about the immensity of changes that are going on today. Because there are things that are absolutely unprecedented, not just in human history, but in the history of life. So not in 100 years or even 1,000 years, but in hundreds of millions of years. It's a very profound change going on today. And what's happening, there are two key events that are occurring and you have the privilege to witness. The first of those is the Silicon Revolution. Computer chips, telecommunications, all these things that have just been so reshaping our world, that allow me to fly in from Istanbul today. And what's happening is that we're taking the sand at our feet, silicon dioxide, and we're breathing a level of complexity into it that rivals life itself. Essentially, what we're doing is we're animating the inanimate world around us. And this is extraordinary. Nothing will ever be the same. And as a consequence, a child of that first revolution is the second revolution. And that is the biotech revolution, the genomics revolution, where we're beginning to understand the workings of life at a profound enough level, at an intimate enough way, that we are beginning to be able to intervene in that process. And we're beginning to seize control of our own evolutionary future. And there can be arguments about how quickly that's going to happen, because we're naturally very, very impatient. But the reality is that that is what is going to occur. And another way of understanding just how big this shift really is to think about the previous evolutionary shift that had a magnitude that was similar to what's going on today in your lifetimes. It was when simple biology, in terms of cells and tissue, began to take simple non-biology, calcium carbonate, calcium phosphate, that it was just excreting into the environment, and it learned how to shape it into structures, into shells, in the case of calcium carbonate, or in the case of calcium phosphate, which is a little more complex, into bones. So it made possible large organisms. And when this happened, it set off a chain of events that over 500 million years allowed the next evolutionary transition to occur, which is what we're in the midst of right now. And that's when complex biology, our cerebral cortex, think about that, is uniting with complex non-biology, computer chips, all of the products of the Silicon Revolution, and in fact is melding with those to create this planetary-wide union, this superorganism, which is, here's a photograph from space. And the power of that is just extraordinary. Where it is going to carry us a century from now is mind-boggling. And if you were to go 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years, which is just an instant in evolutionary time, you can't even think about it. So within your lifetimes, even if they're not extended, just a normal lifespan, we are going to begin to apply these things to modify our biology in ways that challenge our sense of who we are, of what we are. And the lines are already being blurred significantly between prevention and treatment, between therapy and enhancement, between the born and the made. So you can't think in terms of pure biology anymore. Although here is Craig Venter's announcement of synthetic life, synthetic DNA that was used to create microorganisms a couple of months ago. Here's somebody, Oscar Pistorius, who, imagine, 11 seconds, 100-meter dash, and if you look, you see he has no lower parts of his legs. Or this woman who is moving a prosthetic device around, just using her mind like she would a normal arm, through nerves that have been routed to her chest. So this is the kind of thing, this is the depth of change that is really happening. And the key question of our era is really not how long we're going to live or whether we're going to have genetic privacy. It's whether the future of life, intelligent life, is going to be driven by carbon or by silicon. Are we going to pass the mantle to non-biological creatures, essentially? So this is a moment where you're trying to design architecture for, our later years in some sense. Trying to understand what the world will be like in a few decades from now. Because the average lifetime of a building today is about 75 years. And it's a very, very poignant moment. Because, we're in the midst of all of these dizzying, amazing changes. And yet, when it comes right down to it, this is who we are. We're meat. We're flesh and blood. So we can see all of these things happen that almost promise immortality, and yet we just aren't quite there yet. I mean, we still die of cancer and heart disease at pretty much the same rates. I'm certainly getting a lot grayer. We're aging. Diabetes is epidemic. There are no decent drugs for Alzheimer's whatsoever. So the next frontier is our own selves. But right here is what's happening. Sick with desire and fastened to a dying animal, that we kind of know not what we are. And that's why it's such a challenging moment to be alive right now. It's really hard. And what is going to affect us most is not all the technology that's non-biological, because as I said, we're flesh and blood. It's this, genetics and biology. They're our core. And as we're learning about them and learning how to adjust and change them, we're learning to modify ourselves. And hopefully the kinds of things that Aubrey talked about will come to pass sooner rather than later. Maybe they won't. I don't know. So if you have any doubts about whether we're going to apply these things to modify ourselves and to change us, because it will change virtually everything about the world today. I mean, it'll change the way we have children. It'll change our lifespans. It'll change the way we manage our emotional states. It's going to change huge swaths of the economy. It's going to change virtually everything. If you have any question about whether we're going to do that, look at the outside world, and you as architects, I mean, these valleys of glass and stainless steel and concrete that we've erected around ourselves. And they're all over the world. This is not the stomping ground of our Pleistocene ancestors in any sense of the world. And as we're taking this technology and it's becoming more precise and more potent, we're continuing to apply it to the outside world in really interesting ways. But we're also turning it back upon our own selves. And it is really going to touch us, and it's going to change us in some of the ways that I talked about. One of the things that it's going to dramatically remake is medicine and healthcare. And that's what I'm going to focus upon, because that is such an important thing as we're getting older, as we're sick. And as I said, the next frontier isn't that looking out to the moon, out into space, as those earlier images showed us. It's going to be us. All these things are changing. It's us. Because that's who we really care about. It's like this inner journey into ourself, and it's symbolized nicely by genomics, but it really represents a lot more than simple genomics. So the question is, though, there's all this amazing stuff that everybody is talking about, certainly that I've been talking about. It's exciting, it's exhilarating, but unless we get too giddy about it, you got to remember that what most matters to people now, especially when you're getting a little bit older, is therapeutics, preventatives. And here's that cover of Time magazine 10 years ago. DNA is going to change your life. Think of all the exuberance back then, and precious little has come out of it. And so the reality has been there have been no real wonder drugs. There isn't this great swell of drugs that are coming out of the pharmaceutical industry. I can't get into it, but there are all sorts of reasons that there are obstacles to those developments. In fact, the trial for Sertris failed for diabetes that was referred to earlier. You know, and why did this happen? This was supposed to be the code of codes. This was going to be the holy grail of biology, the book of books. Remember how everybody was talking a decade ago? Well, the natural thing to ask is, when is this sort of health care of the future that everybody aspires to, when is it going to become the medicine of today? I want to argue that it's going to happen relatively soon. And the reason for that is that it is a threshold phenomenon. What's happening is it's like a piece of paper. You take a piece of paper and you heat it up, and it gets warmer and warmer and hotter, but there's no real change. And then suddenly, poof, it bursts into flame when you reach the kindling point. And that's a little bit like what's happening with all these technologies. There are many, many different technologies that are evolving, and separately they don't really accomplish very much. And they're very, very price dependent. It doesn't matter that you can sequence somebody's genome. You have to sequence millions of genomes. You have to integrate that with all of our medical history and records. The price has to drop low enough. This is not something for the wealthy, because it's useless for the wealthy alone. It has to be for everyone. And the prices are dropping rather dramatically. Here's a drop. Here's the price of sequencing 1,000 bases of DNA. It's dropped 5 orders of magnitude in 10 years. Most of that in the last 5 years. And that has occurred. It's much, much faster than the computers, than the change in the pace in computers. And see how this is, what this impact this has is Dan Stoichescu, who's an Eastern European entrepreneur that I know. He paid $350,000 to sequence his genome 2 years ago. Wasn't really worth very much to him. But today, that would cost $9,500 from Illumina. And Pacific Biosciences just announced an IPO, and it will cost $1,000 in another 3 years. 2 years after that, it'll be $100. This is pretty likely. And not only that, it's going to take 30 minutes, and you'll be able to do it on a single cell. That's how quickly technology is moving on this. And so, where does that lead us? It leads us to this kind of stuff, where you get, exploding data, the amount of medical data and information, which we can't really use yet, is multiplying by an order of magnitude every 2 to 4 years. That builds up rather quickly. It's an amazing amount of data. And if you want to look at what's going to happen in medicine, look to Leroy Hood, who he developed the sequencer. So his technology at Caltech was what underlies the Human Genome Project. And he'll probably get a Nobel Prize. He founded the Institute for Systems Biology, has about 300 people working for it, and he sees just this amazing amount of data. This is what you would get every 6 months as we move forward, and it's not that far in the future, within a decade, I would say, or maybe a little more. 20,000 single cells, you'd look for sort of immune responsiveness. Individual cells you'd analyze. Look at all stem cells from all through the body. You'd look at your full genome, of course, you'd have that. But look at 1,000 transcriptomes, and that means look at 1,000 different cells in the body and look at which genes are actually being expressed. So you get sort of the status of all of these genes, a bunch of signal nucleotide polymorphisms that are critical for certain diseases, and look at about 25,000 proteins that are circulating through the blood that are early indicators of cancer, of the health of various organ systems. So an amazing amount of data. We're talking about maybe 1 billion points of information on each person every 6 months, at least. And that's in addition to all sorts of sensors, microsensors and stuff. Here's a little device on the end of somebody's fingertip that will monitor arterial pressure continually and send that for an external readout. So this stuff is beginning to get very, very cheap, very, very fast, and it's going to transform medicine into something completely different than it is today. It's going to be an information science. It's something that's not going to really be comprehensible to even the best physicians, although they'll be able to interface with all of this data in certain ways. And it's going to change healthcare from what it is today. And this is the world where older people will be dealing with. It's going to be very predictive because you're getting the tools to do that. I mean, right now we can say, oh, you have cancer, you're not going to be alive a year from now. Personalized, very much tailored to our own biochemistries. It's going to be preventive because that's what we really care about. We don't really want to get the bad predictions. What we want to do is to protect ourselves from all sorts of developments. And it's going to be participatory because we're going to have to provide information. We're going to have to participate in the process. We're going to have to make decisions that are very meaningful, as difficult as whether we're going to get exercise or not, which most people aren't able to make that kind of decision very effectively now. And we're going to have to follow through. We're going to have to comply with these regimes. So that's going to lead to a medicine of the future that's very proactive. It's not you get sick, you go to the doctor. It's you're seeing a doctor regularly all the time. It's going to be dominated by information technology. That'll happen very soon. This is going to be near term because we are reaching those kindling points, those inflection moments. It's going to be, surprisingly, we talked about all the wealthy people, like the Dan Stoichescus of the world, but they can buy access to what? It's going to be inexpensive and it's going to be very widely available because while it is astronomically expensive to do this for an individual, to develop these tools, once you have them, the marginal costs are almost zero. They drop to almost nothing, and there's great value to expand them all over the world. And it's not going to be evolutionary, it's going to be revolutionary. It's going to sweep away medicine as it now exists. It's going to change the relationships between physicians and patients, and it's going to change the power, the relationship there, because people are going to know a lot about their own diseases, and because humans are not going to be able to interpret a lot of this. It's going to be expert systems that are sort of sifting through this enormous amount of data, but it's not going to be this kind of robotic expert. I think what it's really going to be is this kind of a cyber presence, which actually knows a hell of a lot about who we are as individuals and can integrate it. It's going to have a certain wisdom that actually no medical professionals have today. And I think we're going to get to kind of like it because the interfaces will be highly personal. They'll be kind of neat, I suspect. And, you know, it'll be almost like our own personal shaman. It'll have the power of that entity that we've had in the past. So these are the kinds of things that are going to happen in medicine. There are going to be equally powerful things that are going to be happening in other realms. It's a short talk, so we won't go there. And I think the key to having these architecture, or to using architecture and design for designing environments for the older individuals in the future is going to create spaces where these high technology and these sort of cyber presences and continuing to work perhaps, the needs, using the tools of tomorrow, the needs of the people of tomorrow can be met. So who are these people going to be? Well, first of all, there are probably going to be a lot of them that are a lot older, as we've already talked about. Here are some centenarians today. They're reasonably spry. But are these people in these environments, and we've seen him in pictures before, are they going to be a lot fitter? I sort of suspect that they won't be. Because if people can extend their vitality through whatever intervention it is, then they'll probably remain independent and outside of this sphere for which you're designing for a longer period of time. I think people coming into this environment, the new kind of architectural environments, are going to be more decrepit because they're people who can't really survive externally, even in the presence of all of these sort of all of the technological assistance that they can get. They're people. We're going to be a much more wired environment. This was internet nodes in 2005. As you can imagine, it's really exploded much more at this point, which means that the demands will be different. Even if people are a little geographically isolated, they may not be as isolated on a personal basis, and they'll be a lot more savvy about these technologies as the boomers begin to age, for example. They're going to be poor, a lot poorer than they are today, I think, but they're going to have access to technologies that are pretty amazing. This is the sort of the portable phone of the wealthiest person in the world in maybe the 40s or something. And you can translate that into more modern terms. Here's the late 80s. This is the first mobile phone, and Gordon Gekko, master of the universe, 2 pounds. You can run it for maybe half an hour. And you look forward a couple of decades, and you get this. This is Maasai tribesmen texting each other. And a lot nicer device. So the technologies that people are going to be at their disposal are going to be very substantial. One thing that people probably won't have is this sort of family. I don't think that there are going to be the same networks of children and supportive individuals, so there are going to have to be sort of new social structures and interactions that are going to be elaborated in these sorts of communities. And I think we need to think about geography. If your functions are a little diminished, where do you really want to live? I mean, do you really want to live in the Northeast, or do you want to live in some nice area like Costa Rica, a very nice environment that isn't as difficult for us, especially if you're tied in through various sorts of tools that are telephonic kinds of tools where we can interact with people that we know and care about, and also where the costs of labor may be a little bit less for medical care. So these are the kinds of things I think we need to think about as we're going forward and trying to design and develop architecturally communities of the future. And I think it'll be quite extraordinary, the kinds of things that are going to occur in the not too distant future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. I'm very happy that Greg already started to create the bridge towards architecture. And I was thinking if you might all wonder why we had so much about medicine, medical advances, and lifestyle components for the first session. But what for us is very important, that we actually open up our minds as architects, that we leave our bubble and really look around us, what is the future and what is the context we're operating in. And this is the kickoff, the first session we have concluded by now. Tomorrow we're going to go more architectural. more into the physical space in two consecutive sessions. And we also experienced rather short presentations, but the reason for that is that we now have enough time to get together. We would like to invite you guys for drinks and for dinner to get together and sit with all the speakers, ask your questions, engage, socialize, and create new connections. Thank you very much and enjoy your night.